Space is precious in any garden, and wasting it on the wrong plants can cost you years of disappointment. I've made plenty of mistakes growing crops that looked promising but turned into complete regrets. Today, I'm sharing 7 plants I'd never grow again, so you don't have to learn these lessons the hard way. 7. Goji berry. You might think a superfood packed with antioxidants would be worth growing, but the goji berry became my most hated crop. Everyone talks about how healthy it is and how amazing the benefits are, but nobody warns you about the nightmare of actually growing it. The fruit tastes like a bad tomato when fresh, and even drying it out doesn't improve the flavour enough to make it worthwhile. What makes this plant truly unbearable is how it grows. It shoots out in every direction, like it's trying to escape. Then the branches hang down and reroot themselves into the ground. Before you know it, you've got suckers popping up everywhere, and the plant has spread far beyond where you originally planted it. I tried removing mine 5 years ago, and I'm still fighting new growth in multiple corners of my garden. The invasive nature of this plant makes it nearly impossible to get rid of once it's established. Even the tiniest root fragment left in the soil will sprout new growth, and you'll be battling it for years. It grows between fence lines, spreads under barriers, and constantly requires cutting back and digging out. If you absolutely must grow goji berries for their health benefits, keep them in a container. Never plant them directly in the ground unless you want a permanent reminder of your mistake. Some of the other crops I'm mentioning today still grow in my garden because they're established and manageable, but the goji berry had to go. It's one of those plants that keeps haunting you long after you decide you don't want it anymore, and I wouldn't wish that experience on any gardener. 6. Japanese raisin tree. Imagine dedicating 8 years to a tree only to never see it produce a single piece of fruit. That's exactly what happened with my Japanese raisin tree, and it's been nothing but a space-hogging disappointment. This massive tree looks healthy with its beautiful dark green foliage, but looks don't fill your basket or justify the enormous amount of garden real estate it consumes. What makes this tree even more peculiar is that the fruit itself isn't the edible part. The swollen stalks that connect the fruit to the branches are what you're supposed to eat, and they supposedly taste like raisins. Since I've never gotten any fruit after all these years, I've never even had the chance to taste these mysterious stalks. The tree just keeps growing taller and wider, blocking sunlight and crowding out other plants that could actually be productive. The growth pattern is another issue that makes this tree problematic for backyard gardens. It doesn't grow like a traditional tree with dense, strong wood. When you look at the inside of the branches, they're thinner and less substantial, which explains why it grows so quickly and gets so large. For gardeners with limited space, this rapid expansion becomes a serious problem fast. There are so many better options for a large tree in your garden. Apples, pears, persimmons, or even pawpaws would give you actual harvests and rewards for your patience. The Japanese raisin tree might work in a park setting or on a large property where size doesn't matter, but in a typical backyard it's just a wasted opportunity. 8 years of waiting taught me that unique and different doesn't always mean worthwhile. 5. Aronia berry. The aronia berry bush is probably the best of the worst on this list, though that's not saying much. It's a beautiful plant that could easily pass as ornamental landscaping, which makes it perfect if you live somewhere with strict rules about growing edibles. Most people won't recognize it as a food plant, and the small red berries add a nice splash of color when the bush is full of foliage. But here's the problem. You cannot eat these berries fresh off the bush. They're called choke berries for a very good reason. The moment you bite into one, you're hit with an intensely astringent sensation that makes your mouth feel dry and chalky. It's genuinely unpleasant and not something you'd ever want to experience twice. The only way to use these berries is to process them into jams, jellies, or other preserved foods. Yes, aronia berries are known for having extremely high levels of antioxidants, which is their main selling point. They're in the rose family, and they do have legitimate health benefits. However, blueberries offer similar antioxidant benefits, also look beautiful as bushes, can double as edible landscaping, and you can actually eat them straight off the plant. The comparison isn't even close when you factor in convenience and taste. If you have unlimited space and want to experiment with different berry bushes, the aronia might be worth trying. For most backyard gardeners working with limited space, though, it just doesn't make the cut. Every spot in your garden should go to plants that give you the most return on your investment of time and effort. Blueberries win that battle every single time, offering everything the aronia does, plus the ability to enjoy fresh berries without any processing required. Drop a comment below and tell me which crop you regret planting in your own garden. 4. Autumn olive. Fast growth sounds like a great feature until you realise you've planted something that won't stop spreading. The autumn olive is in the Elaeagnus family, which means it's a nitrogen fixer that forms a symbiotic relationship with bacteria in the soil. This allows it to create its own nitrogen and grow at an incredibly rapid pace, and that's exactly what makes it such a problem. These plants have completely taken over the back corner of my garden, growing into massive shrubs that are tough to keep under control. In certain locations, they become invasive and can dominate entire areas if you're not constantly cutting them back. What initially seems like a benefit quickly turns into a maintenance nightmare as you watch them expand far beyond their intended space. You might think the rapid growth would be worth it if the fruit tasted good, but it doesn't. The autumn olive is also called the silver berry because of the little silver specks on the fruit, and when you try to eat them fresh, they're way too tart to be enjoyable. Even when I've used them in jams and jellies, the flavour just doesn't compare to raspberries, strawberries or blueberries. Birds enjoy them, so they do serve a purpose as wildlife food, but that's not why most of us plant things in our gardens. I'm actually considering removing these plants entirely, which tells you everything you need to know about how I feel about them. In a setting where you have acres of land and need something that grows in poor conditions, maybe the autumn olive has a place. For a typical backyard garden where every plant needs to earn its spot, this is one I'd skip. The combination of invasive tendencies and disappointing fruit quality makes it a poor choice for most gardeners. 3. African horned melon. Some plants look so exotic and interesting that you convince yourself they'll be worth growing. The African horned melon had me fooled with its unique spiky appearance and vigorous growth, but it turned into one of my biggest gardening disappointments. This annual grew incredibly well and showed excellent disease resistance, sprawling across my fence like it owned the place. The first major issue is the time commitment. This plant needs a full 100 days from seed to harvest, which is a significant chunk of your growing season. Then, once the fruit finally appears, you have to wait even longer for it to turn a yellowish-orange colour before it's ready to eat. I thought all that patience would pay off with amazing flavour, but when I finally cut into the fruit and tasted it, I was completely let down. The flavour was sour and unimpressive, nothing like the reward I expected after months of waiting. What really confirmed this wasn't worth growing was when I offered some to my dog, who loves cucumbers. He took one lick and walked away without any interest. If even a dog who eats almost anything won't touch it, you know you've grown something that nobody wants. There's a much better alternative that grows similarly. The cucamelon, also called the Mexican sour gherkin, gives you that same vigorous growth and disease resistance without the disappointment. These little fruits that look like tiny watermelons have a great crunchy texture and much better flavour. They even come back year after year from dropped seeds, making them almost like a perennial. The plant grows just as aggressively, but actually delivers fruit you'll want to eat, and it doesn't take 100 days to get there. 2. Jujube tree. Trees that get massive and send out suckers everywhere aren't fun to manage. My jujube trees have reached over 20 feet tall and constantly try to spread through underground roots that pop up as new shoots all around the parent tree. You'll be walking through your garden and find yet another sucker that needs to be dug out with a spade, and this becomes a regular chore that never really ends. These trees also have spikes on them, especially when they're young, though the thorns become less prominent as they mature. I still find myself getting poked when I'm working around them, and just recently got a spike stuck in my skin while trying to remove a sucker. The fruit itself tastes similar to an apple with a slightly different texture, and you can dry them out to make them sweeter and more date-like, which is why some people call them Chinese dates. Here's the thing though, if they taste similar to apples but not quite as good, why wouldn't I just grow actual apples? Apple trees are easier to manage, they don't have spikes, they don't send out annoying root suckers, and they cost less money. I looked up prices online and found that a dwarf Honeycrisp apple tree costs around $50, while a jujube tree of the same size costs $70 or more. The math just doesn't work out in favor of the jujube. I have two varieties, including the Lee, which is self-fertile and produces larger fruit, but even the better variety doesn't justify the extra expense and hassle. For backyard gardeners who want a productive tree that's worth the investment, apples are the clear winner. They're less expensive, easier to care for, better tasting, and you won't spend your weekends digging up suckers. 1. Flying Dragon Hardy Orange. Growing citrus in New Jersey without any winter protection sounded too good to be true, and it turns out it was. When I first planted the Flying Dragon Hardy Orange tree, I was incredibly excited about the possibility of harvesting fresh citrus in a cold climate. The tree can survive harsh winters, stays compact, and produces fruit that looks legitimately promising when it's still green on the branches. Reality hit hard once this tree started maturing, and I got a closer look at what I was dealing with. The spikes on this plant are absolutely massive and genuinely dangerous. We're not talking about little thorns that might scratch you. These are serious spikes that could cause real injury if you fell into the tree or even brushed against it too hard. I'm grateful I planted it on the edge of my garden away from high traffic areas, because having this near a path or play area would be a safety hazard. I stayed optimistic and told myself the fruit would make up for the dangerous spikes. The small orange fruits looked like they had potential, and I imagined enjoying fresh citrus that I grew myself in a northern climate. Then I actually harvested and tasted them. The fruit is packed with large seeds and tastes incredibly bitter, almost inedible when fresh. The only way to use them is in marmalades or preserves, which requires significant processing and isn't what most people want from a citrus tree. The disappointing truth is that this is actually a trifoliate orange, which is primarily used as rootstock for grafting other citrus varieties. It's more of an ornamental than a true edible citrus, and I wasted years of space and effort learning that lesson. The tree does hold nice colour in fall when other plants are losing their leaves, but that's not enough to justify keeping it around. Not every rare or unusual plant deserves space in your garden, and sometimes the common crops are popular for good reason. Focus on plants that actually reward your effort with harvests you'll enjoy, whether that's strawberries, apples, or genuinely worthwhile rare fruits like persimmons and pawpaws.
If you found value in this video, you're going to love this next one.